We're going to talk about Facebook now, or Meta as it's now called, and indeed Instagram. Mark Zuckerberg, the boss of that huge social media empire, has dramatically changed direction, and he's basically he's getting rid of all those left-wing fact-checkers who basically say it's not true if you say anything right-wing. This has been inspired by Donald Trump. Well, let's get on founder and director of the Free Speech Union and, of course, an associate editor of The Spectator, Toby Young. Hello, Toby.
Hi, Kevin. How are you?
Or do I call you your lordship yet, or when does that happen?
No, that's no need for the time being, Kevin. I'll let you know
when I have to sort of bow and scrape. Thank you very much for that. Before we chat, Toby, let's have a listen or a look at Donald Trump in what he said at a press conference today about Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook.
I think they've come a long way. Meta, Facebook. I think they've come a long way. I watched it. The man was very impressive. I watched it. Actually, I watched it on Fox. I'm not allowed to say that. Say it?
Do you think he's directly responding to the threats that you have made to him in the past? With
Probably. Yeah, probably.
So Donald is all in favour of Mark Zuckerberg. Zuckerberg took the precaution, Toby, in November after Trump's victory in the presidential election of going to Mar-a-Lago and making a $1 million donation to Trump's inauguration fund. So he wants to cozy up to the new president. That said, I don't want to be too cynical about this. Zuckerberg, I would suggest, is freeing his social media empire from the shackles of these fact-checkers, and I use the term loosely, because as Zuckerberg said, the problem with these fact-checkers is they were left-wing biased. And in fact, their idea of checking a fact was if you suggested something was right-wing, they would say it wasn't true. They censored Facebook, they censored Instagram. So this is a good day for freedom of speech, isn't it?
I think it is a good day for freedom of speech. I mean, we can speculate about Mark Zuckerberg's motives, and maybe he does want to cozy up to Trump. But we shouldn't look a gift horse in the mouth. This is fantastic news. The Free Speech Union has been campaigning against censorship masquerading as fact-checking now for almost 5 years. And Facebook's been one of the worst offenders. There was a famous case, Kevin, when Professor Carl Hennigan and his colleague Dr. Tom Jefferson wrote up a Danish mask study in The Spectator, which was a properly randomly controlled scientific study to try and determine just how effective wearing masks was at preventing infection from COVID-19. This was a couple of years ago, and this study showed that it was they were completely ineffective. And they wrote up an accurate summary of this study, and a fact checker on Facebook flagged it false information. Carl Hennigan is the Oxford Professor of Evidence-Based Medicine. Dr. Tom Jefferson is one of the world's leading, virologists. The idea that some humanities grad in Palo Alto knows more about, how effective masks are. I mean, it's ludicrous. They just didn't like it because it was heretical information. It just was counter-narrative, so it was labelled false. But that kind of thing's been happening for years across a lot of different social media platforms, but particularly on Facebook. And it's fantastic that Mark Zuckerberg has decided that actually that's destroyed more trust than it's created. If the intention was to, prevent certain opinions gaining traction and stop people like Donald Trump being elected, it's obviously completely ineffective. On the contrary, it has the opposite of its intended effect. So, he's abandoning it very sensibly, I think. And I hope that other social media platforms will follow suit.
Yeah, me too. He said that the problem with the fact checkers was that they were too politically biased. We all agree with that. And dumping them will get rid of, and I'm quoting Zuckerberg here, get rid of a bunch of restrictions on topics like immigration and gender that are just out of touch with mainstream discourse. And there's this feeling that Donald Trump's triumph in the election is somehow, I mean, I've been talking to my American friends over there, that they feel like they're emerging from this era of darkness, this era of cancel culture, where if you suggested that a bloke in a dress was not a woman, your life would be ruined, you'd be cancelled. There's this feeling that Donald Trump is sweeping that all out of the bin, and there's a new feeling that a new likeness is descending on America, and obviously Zuckerberg's, getting on the bandwagon, but I still think it's good news. But I thought that this morning, The Guardian, The Guardian's headline was "Dismay" as Zuckerberg dumps the fact-checkers. Left-wingers, they love these fact-checkers, don't they? What is that, do you think?
Yeah, I think I know what it is. It's essentially a boondoggle. So the left, rather than kind of make an honest case in the public square for the policies they believe in, they prefer to prosecute the argument by claiming that they're right and the other side have just got it wrong. They've just been misinformed. And that's why they're trafficking in misinformation and disinformation, why they're getting their facts wrong, because there is only one correct, factually accurate point of view, and it's the radical, progressive, woke point of view. And anyone who disagrees with it is just factually wrong. It's a kind of rhetorical device they've been, using now for a long time to try and discredit and smear their opponents, to try and shut down debate, to try and make their values, their policies unchallengeable. And I think people have just finally woken up to it. They realize that when, something is labeled mis or disinformation or even hate speech by, a Guardian columnist, what they mean is this is a point of view that I, as a upstanding member of the radical progressive left, disapprove of. It's not actually inaccurate or factually wrong. It's just something they disapprove of, and they're just pretending. They're engaging in this pretense for years that it's all about being accurate and being factual, being evidence-based, being led by the science. We're led by the science. Our opponents are culture warriors. It's balls, and I think people have finally woken up to that fact.
Yes, indeed. The big question that people like you and me always asked is who checks the fact checkers? In terms of what you've just been talking about, it is, of course, alive and well and living in the BBC in the department called Verify, which has this disarming habit of getting all of its facts terribly wrong. Recently, it failed to distinguish between acres and hectares when it was dealing with the rural inheritance tax issue. I mean, that's how bad BBC Verify is, but they have this department that will tell you you're wrong if you happen to be conservative. How much credence do you put towards this theory, Toby, that the departure of Nick Clegg, the former Meta president of global affairs, to be replaced by prominent Republican Joe Kaplan, is indicative of what's been going on at Facebook, that Nick Clegg loved the fact-checking system, and now that Zuckerberg doesn't want it anymore, Clegg has been dispatched towards the horizon, clutching his $18 million worth of share sales. But I think that we can deduce that Zuckerberg felt that in Trump's America, this fact-checking system endorsed by Nick Clegg was not for him and not for Meta anymore.
I think that's right. I mean, I think it probably would have been quite difficult for Zuckerberg to ditch this fact-checking apparatus if Clegg remained Facebook's head of public affairs. He clearly believes in it. He's been a great exponent of fact-checking. He's very much one of these people who pretends that there is no fundamental disagreement when it comes to core values between, say, Reform, the Conservatives, Labour, the Lib Dems. It's just one side is just factually right, led by the science, evidence-based, and the other side are just kind of denialist lunatics. That's been very much kind of Clegg's kind of rhetorical strategy now for years. So I think it would have been difficult for Facebook to abandon the fact checkers. But I do worry, Kevin. what's going to happen to these fact checkers? I mean, this was their kind of, this was a huge source of income for them. A lot of fact checking organizations worked for Facebook. They had contracts with Facebook. There are large companies. I mean, the censorship industrial complex, is financially dependent on social media platforms like Facebook, paying them huge sums of money to kind of sit there in their basements, kind of trying to smear anyone on the right as kind of false or misleading. I had this idea, Kevin, that I would pretend, for a kind of stunt, like you get a group of people to pretend they're from a kind of recruitment agency from the North Korean state. And you approach kind of all these unemployed fact checkers and say, can I interest you in a job working in the North Korean media? And I bet half of them would say yes. They'd bite your arm off because people aren't employing them at Facebook anymore.
Right up their street. One last question, Toby. Thanks very much for coming on. Always good to talk to you. Obviously, as I said earlier, America does seem to be awakening from this kind of dark era of cancel culture, extreme wokeism as promoted by Biden and Kamala Harris. We have a problem here. We alone in Britain seem to be the only country that hasn't swung right. We've swung left. Do we expect that the process of emerging from wokery, which I do see encouraging signs of in this country, will be somewhat slower, somewhat hampered by Starmer and the gang?
There's no doubt about it. I had a meeting with all my staff at the Free Speech Union earlier today, and we currently have over 230 open cases. Membership has exploded since July 4th. It's gone from 14,000 to 24,000 members. Right. And people are, justifiably terrified that the police are going to knock on their door because of something they've said on, Facebook or X or whatever. We saw the story in today's paper that a woman who said something supposedly inflammatory and insensitive about the riots isn't eligible for early release, but people actually in prison for rioting, they are eligible for early release. So seemingly commenting in a politically incorrect way on the social disorder this last summer is a more heinous crime in the eyes of the criminal authorities than actually participating in a riot. And so it's going to be a while, I think, before the sea change that seems to be taking place in America blows across the Atlantic. But I think it's positive that Kamala Harris didn't win. If she'd have won, then there would have been this kind of axis of evil, this unholy alliance across the Atlantic. Starmer and his minions would have taken huge succor from that. But, she didn't win. Trudeau's gone. Jacinda Ardern went a couple of years ago. It looks like all the radical, progressive, authoritarian liberals who rule with an iron fist under the pretense of being nice are falling like, one by one. And Starmer's looking like the last man standing. So how much longer can he last? I hope not very long.
Me too, but I suspect we'll have to put up with another 4 years of Labour and, as you say, by extension, too much wokery and cancel culture. We'll be the last to emerge from this, but I do believe we will, because I think people have had enough. In no small part due to your great work at the Free Speech Union, Toby. Great to talk to you, and congratulations once again on your elevation. Toby Young there, soon to be Lord Toby Young. He's going up to the upper chamber. Good to see someone who's worth it going into the upper chamber. Good to see someone who's not some old politician mate of Starmer or somebody who's just going to fill up those ermine-clad benches with verbiage. So good. For once, we've got a lord coming up, Toby Young, who deserves his place in the upper chamber.